I was a Kensei, not a killer, not a monk, something between. On the last day of the Sengoku chaos. The air is thick with incense and ghost light. The trees do not move, yet the leaves whisper as if speaking through memory. I sit still, cross-legged, back straight, my eyes neither close nor open. In this space between night and day, the world does not demand anything from me. I can be just breath. I have not drawn my sword in 5 years. The shrine is colder now. Not because the seasons have changed, but because I have. My students rise with the light, practicing quietly in the inner courtyard. Their footsteps are as soft as snow. They don't yet know what I know, that every step echoes louder when you carry regret. We hang strips of white paper, shied at the gates. They flutter like pale ghosts in the morning wind. These are offerings to spirits, to ancestors, to peace. We wash our hands with ladles before entering the temple, purifying not just skin, but intention. Before the first kata, we bow not to each other, but to the silence. I was born in the 1480s in a land fractured by ambition. Japan was no country then. It was a battlefield sown from rice paddies and screams. By 10, I held a blade. By 20, I had bled for daimyo who died nameless. By 30, they called me invincible. But that name is a curse. Because when no one can beat you, you begin to wonder if the sword has become your prison. I wandered for 20 years, the Mushashugyo, the path of the sword pilgrim. From the northern snows of Ichigo to the southern winds of Kyushu, I accepted every duel, no matter the rank. I fought 37 battles, 19 official duels, and perhaps 212 men fell beneath my strikes. In the port town of Hakata, I defeated a ronin who attacked me over spilled sake. In the forests of Aizu, I fought a former monk who believed death in combat would cleanse his sins. I remember a boy, not yet 15, who shook as he drew his blade. I disarmed him with a single motion, then bought him rice. I do not say this with pride. I say it with the weight of memory. I remember each face. Some of them were little more than boys, eager to prove themselves against Bokuden, the silent blade. 6 times I was struck by arrows, once through the shoulder, once grazing my rib. The rest shallow, but no steel ever cut me. And that terrified me, because it meant the sword was no longer a challenge. It was routine. And routine is the enemy of truth. Japan in those days was a country on fire. The Ashikaga shogunate was a ghost, and every province burned with ambition. Daimyo raised armies not for justice, but for land, taxes, legacy. Villages were conscripted overnight, entire harvests seized. Peasant uprisings, known as iko-iki, challenged samurai rule with prayers and pitchforks. Even temples became fortresses. In those years, death was not news. It was daily. And the sword was both justice and excuse. My mornings begin with kata, not for war, for remembrance. The movements are the same: slash, parry, strike. But the heart inside them is different. I am not preparing to kill. I am trying to listen. Listen to the part of myself that once believed violence was truth. I remember a duel on a misty bridge in Iga province. The man had eyes like mine, calm, assured, already halfway gone. He moved perfectly. We circled 3 times, and in the space between breaths, I struck. He fell without sound. But that night, I could not sleep. Not from guilt, from clarity. He was me. And I had erased him. For what? Another time, in the court of a wealthy daimyo, I was challenged by 3 ronin at once. They were fast, desperate. I disarmed all 3 without killing them. It was the first time I realized mercy is a greater show of mastery than death. I began writing my thoughts then, in ink on mulberry paper. Not to publish, but to record. As if by writing I could distill what the blade could not. Still, my name grew, and with it, the pressure. People came from every province to test themselves against me. Every duel was another brick in a wall around my soul. In 1552, I was summoned to Kyoto. Ashikaga Yoshiteru, the new shogun, wanted a tutor. He was 17, too young for power, too old for peace. When I arrived, I found a boy trembling beneath his armor. He could recite 1,000 sword forms, but his hands shook. "You're afraid of death," I told him. "No," he said. "I'm afraid of not being remembered." That struck me harder than any blade. I taught him more than swordplay. I taught him to move in silence, to speak only when needed. I told him, the best duel is the one that never happens. He never forgot that. And when he died, assassinated in his own palace, I wept. Because he tried. He truly tried. In court, politics were deadlier than swords. The shogunate was a stage play, and Yoshiteru was cast too young. His enemies wore silk, not armor. They killed with whispers. It was after Kyoto that I returned to Kashima and never left. I built a school, not just for fighters, for thinkers, for those who had seen enough blood. We practiced with bokken, wooden swords, until even those felt like too much. One day, I stood before my students and said, "Today, we begin a new style. No sword, no death, only presence." They laughed. I did not. I called it Mutekatsuryu, the school of defeating without weapons, because the true enemy is not out there. It's in here, in the ego, in the need to dominate. We studied not only swordsmanship, but no theater, tea ceremony, ink painting, things that required patience, breath, humility. We hosted Goryoi festivals to honor the dead, not with cries for vengeance, but with flute music and incense. There's a story they still tell. A brash young swordsman shouted at me across a river, "Fight me, old man." Prove you're not just a story. I smiled, invited him onto my boat. Midway across, I pointed to an island. "Let's duel there." He jumped, sword drawn. I pushed off the boat and drifted away. He stood there, wet, confused, humiliated. I said, "This is my school. The one where the best strike is not needing to strike at all." And I never saw him again. Years later, his son became a student. Now, as dusk bleeds across the stone, I feel the weight lifting. I no longer dream of duels. I dream of water, wind, stillness. My sword is not retired. It is complete. To fight is to survive, but to stop fighting, to choose peace, that is something only the strong can do. I sit again. The fire crackles. A student plays flute in the distance. And I know this is my final day. Not because I will die, but because I no longer need to be Bokuden the blade. Night folds the shrine into black silk. Crickets count the seconds. I smile. I was a Kensei. And this was the last night the sword ruled me.